He is the chosen one. You must see it.
I gave Qui-Gon my word.
Is he the chosen one?
He is.
And it is the Jedi who will stand in the way of peace.
It's not whether or not we fight.
It's how we choose to fight that matters.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
The Force will be with you, always.
And I will not be the last Jedi.
You are listening to The World Between Worlds, a Star Wars podcast where we have been marathoning all of Star Wars in the lead up to the rise of Skywalker. So kicks off Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels. Magnifying glass. We're looking at Mandalore. This is our first return to the capital city, the actual planet of Mandalore. We're picking up with our Mandalorian lead from the Ghost Crew, Sabine Wren, and her story, which was left on a kind of a cliffhanger from Season 3. And also picking up many of the plot threads from the Clone Wars, even in more direct fashion than they have previously with the Mandalore story. We are talking about Star Wars Rebels Season 4, Episodes 1 and 2, The Heroes of Mandalore. My name is Yates.
And my name is Keats.
So the story starts off pretty straightforward as a mission for Sabine and her family to go save her father, who they talked about in Season 3. In here, we learn he's actually a bit of a celebrity. He's like a famous Mandalorian artist or architect. He's a public figure. And in the process of attempting to free him, we're also exposed to other factions.
Pretty much all of them, honestly.
Yeah,
toward the end.
That's true. Over the course of like the whole story, pretty much different factions or representatives of all these different Mandalorian houses and that have been introduced or mentioned are coming into the fold, and it looks like whatever's going to happen on Mandalore is getting pretty big. At the same time, at the epicenter of all of this, we're reintroducing Sabine's super weapon that she designed when she was a kid at the Imperial Academy, and that the Empire has reforged this and is going to use it against the people. And that's pretty much everything, and Sabine's like right at the center of everything that's going on.
You're a Mandalorian. Why would you create such an abomination? This is the weapon of a coward.
I was young. It was a challenge and I was arrogant. But when I realized the Empire tested it and actually planned to use it, I sabotaged the prototype and destroyed the plans. I thought that was the end of it, I swear to you.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I didn't really enjoy these episodes at all. It kind of reminded me of like the Season 2 run-of-the-mill infiltrate the Empire kind of stuff. And then a lot of the back and forth banter between the characters was like very uninteresting, and it seemed kind of rushed. I don't know. Like there was no like sense of progression for me. It didn't feel like the characters were learning anything or like building on top of any of the action sequences. It just felt very like, haha, quip, haha, quip. I'm with Sabine. I'm not with Sabine. Not intense, just more. It was a lot of just like very surface level comments that I couldn't really find myself engaged in. I mean, there is some like visual stuff that's pretty cool. I like seeing Ezra fly around on the jetpack and like his progression over the episode.
Yeah, I liked the action, and I didn't really go in expecting quips. I guess I just wasn't really paying attention to that because it just seemed like it was very action oriented. And I thought the majority of the dramatic beats where something like took a turn or like there's a couple moments that involved some pretty heated discussions, and I pretty much enjoyed all that. I liked all the instances of world building. It's not my favorite, but I definitely enjoyed it.
Yates, do you want to tell a story about how we saw this episode?
I think you're absolutely correct, Keats. Let's wind the clocks back a year.
It's actually like 2 or 3 years ago.
It was Orlando, Florida.
Star Wars Celebration. The Orange County Convention Center, I think it's called.
Yates, Keats, Jordan.
His girlfriend at the time.
No need to go
no
there.
need to get into that.
We were at the panel for Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels.
If I remember correctly, I think the panel was called Season 4 Sneak Peek.
We were in very close proximity to Season 3. Like, Season 3 had just wrapped up within maybe a month or so. It could have even been a matter of weeks. So I was very much anticipating because, I felt, and I feel like a lot of viewers felt this way, that Rebels was on a inclined towards very great things, and we were at the season 4 panel. It was actually, I think, the only major panel that we got into. We didn't get into anything else, but all we really cared about was Rebels to begin with, and we were extremely happy. They announced the show was ending, which was crazy. Then they showed the first of this 2-parter for us at the end. If you've watched the episode, you know that it ends on what would be an incredible gut punch of a cliffhanger ending, which was exactly our experience for like the months and months leading up to watching, only for the next episode to completely reverse.
They completely went back on what the first episode set up, which was a really long build up to disappointment.
Yes.
Did you feel the same?
I mean, yeah, I was definitely, well, it's like an extreme choice to potentially kill Sabine's mom and brother. Really, the show hasn't even done much up until that point to like, I mean, I know Ezra's parents are dead, but they died off screen. This is pretty out there, and I was like, wow, it's crazy that they're going that far, and that it's the final season. Wow, I totally get the stakes. It's going to be really intense and really messed up. And then they go back on it immediately. So yes, I was incredibly disappointed when I saw that. But watching it in context now, it's written, and I believe both episodes were aired back to back. All of season 4 was aired 2 episodes at a time. So we are like the only people in the world that got screwed over in this way of just that tension is addressed immediately within the first 5 seconds of the next episode.
Yeah.
How did it make you feel, Keats?
Even if I hadn't seen it at Celebration and just had seen it on TV live as it was coming out, I probably still would have been disappointed just because it's not like we saw that part of it and we misinterpreted something that they had set up for us. It's very implicit that these characters had died. The drama is like really well shot within like the final shot of part 1.
Yeah.
For you to feel an emotion like that. I mean, even if I had just seen it on TV, I still probably would have been disappointed just because it's so misleading.
Yeah, I guess it's probably one of the few instances in Rebels where it really does sort of like pull the rug under you for no reason. Like I'm trying to think of a comparable moment where like they trick the audience, but I can't really think of anything like that in the show.
I'm sure I could think of something.
Not as extreme as this, I don't think.
Definitely not to this capacity, but yeah.
Well, I agree that the way it's portrayed in the episode, it's unambiguous that her parents have died, and then in the next episode it immediately reneges that. I was mostly unbothered by it, at least in this viewing, just because the way in which it happens is like kind of out of left field. Like I wanted to see Sabine's family sort of fleshed out more. I was okay with the way it went, but nothing will undo the experience of having watched them die and then waited months, really hyped on that plot point. That was extremely disappointing.
I mean, for me, the best part of the whole first half of this 2-parter was just seeing Kanan and Hera talk over the intercom. And that was like completely unrelated to the entire episode. That could have been deleted and it wouldn't have interrupted the flow whatsoever.
Yeah, it did. That scene definitely felt like just providing context to what's going on or where we left off previously. Because it's another strange season premiere for Star Wars Rebels where you would think most logically where we'd pick up is not where we end up picking up with these characters. But I felt pretty unoffended by that since I didn't have to wait to watch it. Most of the other characters were like super sidelined. Ezra and Kanan are very much supporting characters, even more so like supporting characters to the new supporting characters. Like really the Mandalorians are at the center of what's going on, and Ezra and Kanan are super on the fringes. They don't have that much going on. Mm-hmm. But there are a couple moments where I liked Ezra's chipping in every once in a while. Actually, I really liked the scene where Sabine explains, and I know it was explained in the Clone Wars, but it was good to get a reminder and also to get it from a young person's point of view. Just that, I grew up on the planet. It's just already been destroyed for like 1,000 years, and explaining that to Ezra.
I was thinking about that.
Once upon a time, these plains were covered with grass, but I never saw it. This destruction happened before I was born.
And it never grew back?
Never had a chance to.
And I remember Clone Wars being so green and Robloxy.
But that's on the inside.
That's on the inside, and we never went outside before. So I kind of wanted to go back inside.
I will say that these 2 episodes were pretty much all about action and a lot of references to what's happening politically inside of Mandalore. And I've said it at a couple episodes previously, like the Mon Mothma episode. These 2 episodes are lesser because we are not looking at the political stuff. We don't get to see, in my opinion, the prequel type of politicking because they're afraid of doing that. With Rebels, honestly, I will say it kind of makes more sense because it seems chaotic, but like also just tonally, like it made more sense for Clone Wars because Clone Wars was just a bit more operating there.
That's honestly kind of how I felt during the Legacy of Mandalore episode. Kanan and Ezra like walk into Clan Ren's house, and it's just like there's this entire political debauchery happening like right in front of them, and it's just like Kanan and Ezra like feel like they're completely out of place here. And there's even like a line about how awkward things are because it doesn't feel like they belong there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like they care so much. There's so many details. So much of this episode is just like setting up things for Mandalore. It's like, well, how I remember Mandalore was the political stuff with Satine and Obi-Wan. We're continuing that story, but not engaging with any of that stuff. That would be another thing for me where I'm just like, it would be better to just actually show it than to have a character walk in and say,
my name is Bo-Katan. I was Duchess Satine's sister.
Yeah.
And now I live with Cran Grape.
Cran Apple.
Cran Apple.
Yeah, it would have been better to just like actually go there, but oh well. Been living without prequel politics almost all of my life. So
we're about to get a little bit more of it, so stay tuned. Zilla Beast is back. Kylo Ren fought it. World Between Worlds confirmed.
Kylo Ren in the middle of the First Order Senate chamber. Encountered a Zilla Beast. I think all the surface level details were fine for me. I was entertained all throughout, just not at the level that I've been the past handful of episodes. I definitely see what you're saying in regards to the drama. Sabine's story here, like I said, Sabine's at the center of everything going on. And the whole drama surrounding her and like what does she learn, to me it's kind of like one step forward, one step back. So the plus sides, seeing her interact with her father was cool. I like that he's like a totally different character, I feel like, than what we've had before. Seeing them talk about fake art history, like I'm super about that. But so seeing her in that context was cool. And then also getting to see what the weapon that she designed was, to watch her sort of grapple with that was cool. At the same time, what it ended up boiling down to at the end was a decision whether or not to use the weapon on the Empire to, like, I don't know, to torture them or to, it's sort of like classic Star Wars, like a vague promise of power. If she doesn't destroy the weapon, she can use the weapon. And it reminded me a little bit too much of, funny enough, the episode way back in season 2 where you guys were talking about, is Sabine learning that killing people is bad really that interesting? I mean, I've made the argument that it was, and I feel like pretty much most Star Wars, like, that question is like brought up. But to me, it's just like this episode brought that question up again, and it's like, oh, we've already had this arc with Sabine a long time ago. So for that element of it, for me, I was just like, okay, like, we're back here again. I understand that the stakes are a lot higher, so it's definitely reasonable. But thankfully, I remember Sabine doing a lot of other noteworthy things throughout the rest of the season, so this isn't the end of her story. But as a sort of send-off to what Rebels has been doing with Mandalore and how Rebels has expanded Sabine's story to be all part of that, for me, it was sort of like, it was an ultimately inconsequential little experience.
It was definitely inconsequential to Sabine, for sure.
Yeah.
And then it was more like building off of like world building for Mandalore.
Exactly.
And honestly,
and
it just felt like a prologue to another show, is what it reminded me of.
I definitely thought that.
And I thought, oh my God, I really don't want to watch this show at all. It's just going to be war nonstop, bloodshed after bloodshed. And I think that's the thing that me and Jessica were kind of talking about a little bit before. I don't think she, by default, finds the Mandalorians uninteresting or anything like that. I don't really see the point in investing my time with them because it's like the same thing over and over again. To go back to what you were saying about Sabine with like the whole ending dilemma thing, I didn't really even think about it in that context, but it did feel like a little bit too... It's funny, we were talking about this exact same thing with another episode that I can't remember, but it felt like they were being emotionally manipulative to me because it felt like they were trying to get a lot of parallels from Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, I definitely think that was on purpose.
Yeah. But with that completely aside, I was like, I know Sabine's character at this point enough to know what she's going to do, even if like at this point in time she's like a little bit off of her rocker because of all the stuff that she's like gone through in the past couple hours. But I never like doubted it for a second that she would like make the wrong decision or anything like that.
To beat the Empire, this is the only way.
It's not our way. It's their way. You came here to make things right. Will the future of Mandalore be one of honor or cowardice?
I think the second half was a lot more engaging than the first half. Mostly just because we get to see Sabine kind of go through an emotional time. But on top of that, we get to see like her stir up conflict with other people like Bo-Katan and even just like some of not the Protectors but Bo-Katan's clan.
Yeah.
Kind of like they have to like defend themselves against, and I thought that was like some neat stuff.
That was when I was the most engaged dramatically, and I really liked the moment where she said like, "Okay, yes, I deserve this."
Yeah, because I was like hoping she would say something like, you know, let's fight this fight, but then afterwards I'm more than willing to go to court or go to trial or something like that.
Right.
But of course she didn't say that because it's either death penalty or you're free to go.
Right. And I think that's a sign of character growth too. And like it was dramatic, and then I liked how that was sort of what won Bo-Katan over and like the respect of her peers. So that was when I was the most into it too. And also like there was a point where just Bo-Katan like throws her against a wall and just like, what the fuck? Like, no one told me about this when I came to rescue you.
Right.
And I thought that those moments were my favorite, more than like the actual climax. And actually, I really liked the ending, but I feel like that would probably be like, if you're not interested in Mandalore at all, then that would be like where you're just like, whatever.
I was just like, let's move on.
No, I was really hype. So to be clear, yeah, I
mean, it was executed great. I love her unsheathing the Darksaber, then everyone kneeling at the same time. I could like feel the power coming from that area, but I just wasn't interested in what it was promising.
Yeah, so I am really excited for this stuff to be picked up, and I've really liked Mandalore from the beginning, and that was probably the only other thing that was buoying me through this experience of these two episodes, because the Sabine story wasn't really there, but we do get a bit more of insight into Mandalore, and I'm curious what the Civil War is going to be about. I feel very little doubt in my mind that some of this stuff, they knew they were going to be doing The Mandalorian upcoming, and some of it is... To your point, you said, are they setting up a show? I feel like some of these things are going to be picked up in the show. It's hard, or at least it's hard not to think that given how close we are to
right.
it.
I feel like if they don't do that, that would surprise me even more so. Even as we were watching the episodes, there's like one specific scene where Bo-Katan and Fen Rao are talking about how much of a great leader Sabine is. But just like seeing the two of them talk back and forth and like seeing Fen Rao's history and knowing where Bo-Katan comes from in the Clone Wars, all of that like pre-disclosed context, like really, it just made me feel more engaged than like the episodes did. The whole like action tactical planning element of it is just like routine at this point. And I mean, so is like two characters having a conversation, obviously, but we never got to see Bo-Katan before now. And I feel like it just felt fresh, and it felt, we've never just seen like two C-list characters talk to each other one-on-one. It's always been like Kanan talking to this C-list character, or a C-list character talking to Sabine or something like that. So just seeing these extremely minor characters have a conversation about the main characters was probably the most interesting part to me. And I really hope they're in The Mandalorian because I love Fen Rao so much. And Bo-Katan has potential. I don't really care about her at this point in time, but...
Yeah, well, she's also... So Bo-Katan is interesting because she was set up to become a more important character in Clone Wars.
You're Satine's sister, aren't you? I'm so sorry.
And then Clone Wars ended, and she did not get to become that. So we're just kind of filled in. Oh, she took over after Satine for a short time, and then there was a coup and she was ousted. That all happened off screen. I imagine we'll probably see it.
They mentioned that in this episode, and I was like, I don't remember any of this happening. But I just realized it was because that hadn't actually been part of the Clone Wars. I thought they were going to talk. They're like, what's your story, Bo-Katan? And then they were going to talk about Darth Maul and stuff. But they were talking about this whole other thing that it felt like they were making up on the spot. And I was like, are they going to say that didn't happen?
So she was set up to be a more significant character, didn't get that. And so sort of she enters now. It's like a curious thing, but I'm sure in a year from now, probably we'll know a lot more about Bo-Katan. But yeah, so she's supposed to come in and like start telling people what to do and stuff. But other than that, Katie Sackhoff is doing her voice. Like we're just sort of, she's strong, she's intimidating, and she's a good fighter.
Yeah, and I have zero idea who Katie Sackhoff is. I know she's an actress from Game of Thrones, but
she's not in Games of Thrones.
Okay, well, then I know she's an actress. So, because I know a lot of people will be like Katie Sackhoff, who played Bo-Katan, and I'm like, I don't know who that is.
She's the main character in Battlestar Galactica. She's Starbuck.
Oh, okay. I feel like there's like a lot of like fan appreciation for Bo-Katan, but I just don't get it. She was kind of witness to something in the Clone Wars, and then she comes back.
For me, honestly, well, I think it's a lot. It's the actress, Katie Sackhoff, has like a lot of like a pretty loyal fan base, and I think it's the whole Mando fan obsession. And then I also think it's honestly her design. And this was another thing that I like. Bo-Katan might be my favorite Mandalorian suit, and also I love.
What's so special about Bo-Katan suit?
I actually like her one in Clone Wars more, but I just like the print on it. I just think it looks really cool.
I don't even remember what it looks like. All I can think of is her without her helmet on.
Yeah, that, and I remember... It's funny, because when we saw it in Season 3, I was like, that's not how I remember it. Sabine's mom, I also love her helmet design. It's probably... that's one of my favorites.
It's like, it's against type with the horns and stuff.
Yep. Also, if you just notice that the women have like their different visor shape. So Sabine and Ursa and Bo-Katan all have their own visor shapes. So in my vast adoration of the Mandalorian Boba Fett fandom thing, my big contribution is I like those costumes the most. They're my favorite.
There's even a part in this episode where one of the Mandalorians were like, without our suits, we're nothing. And I was just like, you got that right.
Hard disagree. But, I mean, I think that's the whole point of the character.
Let me try to get it correct. It was...
No, it's the suit. The suit is our identity.
Yeah, because they were just talking about how they're not expendable. They're like, the suits are a part of our identity. We can't just take them off. But, I don't know. I'm just part of Ezra's camp. Like, just... don't wear Mandalorian suits and your whole people won't be obliterated. And still you can retaliate and fight back.
I mean, I think it's just something that you have to accept as part of the world. And if
it is, but I mean, you could say like...
I mean, it's the same thing with like the Kalikori. I mean, to be fair, Hera did have to like... It's the same with any of the cultural stuff, and it's really one of the only things, not one of the only things, but it's one of the things I've most consistently enjoyed throughout.
But the whole lesson of the Kalikori episode was about letting go of the material things and appreciating the family that you have, and that's the only lineage that counts.
But it's not the same for Sabine.
But yeah, I know, I understand it's not the same for her because it's a different culture, but it's just like... That's a transformation she had to go through, and it felt very satisfying to see her do that. Sabine kind of rejected that whole idea, and it only like just barely worked in the end. I don't know. I think I just would have been more satisfied if she had gone through another transformation as opposed to being so stubborn.
Undoubtedly, I agree. But it wasn't... I think the idea was that the whole of Mandalore, like none of them were going to agree, were going to concede to change their armor. And I think the explanation was pretty... I was pretty happy with it. It was just like, oh, this armor is 500 years of my family old, and they're not just going to throw it away.
I mean, yeah, I could totally understand that from like a entire cultural perspective of like everyone on the planet having to change. Like, I could totally understand people not wanting to do that. We have that problem in our own world.
Right.
But I just thought for Sabine specifically, it didn't make sense to me because she's been like surrounded by her own surrogate family, and Hera went through a very, very similar transformation for what she had to sacrifice.
That's true. I feel you. They didn't, that was an opportunity. Again, like I said, the whole dramatic Sabine side of it was like one step forward and one step back. Like she did learn something, but also like we're kind of retreading old ground at the same time. And there were opportunities for her to learn more.
Maybe that's why they didn't have Hera in this episode.
Yeah,
it would have been conflicting.
Yeah, I mentioned that at another episode where I think one character, where Kanan and Rex are paired together, and I was just like, if Hera was there, Kanan would not be acting like such a jerk.
Yes, exactly.
That's a good point. For me, like that sort of just more calls into question the whole conceit of the weapon, which just seemed, it makes sense if it's like a special type of metal that you could, use that and like focus it on exclusively that type of metal. But at the end of the day, like probably the weirdest Imperial super weapon so far. Most of the other ones have been pretty cool.
Niche.
I like the way Thrawn puts it.
Yeah, because it's literally their weakness.
But you miss the true artistry of this weapon, Governor Saxon. It turns an armor, legendary for its strength, into a crippling weakness, and it strikes at the very heart of your people's tradition.
You said the Emperor wanted this uprising dealt with quickly. This will end it.
I mean, it is a niche weapon, but it's like, it makes complete sense. Kind of weird that Sabine was the one to do that, to throw out the idea of exploiting Mandalorian culture as a weakness, which means at one point in her life, she knew that was like a flaw that most Mandalorians had in common. And now she's like trying to go back on that and just trying to stay with her Mandalorian culture.
Well, I guess that makes sense.
I guess it could make sense.
Yeah, well, I guess we don't know the reasons why she joined the Imperial Academy, because thinking about it, when you put it that way, I was like, okay, maybe it was also just kind of like, listen, Mom, like, you care too much about your Mandalore politics, like, I'm gonna join the Empire. They don't care about that stuff, you know, all they care about is like results. I'm going through this rebellious phase where I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna be way more successful being an Imperial than I ever was a Mandalorian. But you also get the impression, like, when they talk about her past, that they were, like, really happy with how well she was doing there. So, I don't know.
We don't really get that context of, like, what she was like in the Imperial Academy.
Right.
So the whole thing is just kind of, like, up for speculation.
Yeah, it's up to our imaginations.
I really want to know, like, because I know, like, this is, like, pretty much the end of Sabine's, like, cultural storytelling. But I still, like, really want to understand, like, how she got with the Ghost crew to begin with. They hinted at it that one time, and now it's been on my mind ever since.
I feel like there could be like a book series or a comic series with her and the young Ghost crew. That would be great. Like just Sabine, Kanan, and Hera and Zeb. Like that sounds fun.
Or maybe even just starting it with just Kanan and Hera, like right after A New Dawn or something.
Yeah, that
and
would
then
be
just
cool.
like recruiting people. Or maybe they even have Ghost members that died off. Obviously, The Mandalorian is coming out, but that's probably going to be less of a Mandalorian culture story and more about a guy on the run kind of story or whatever. How would you feel if we never got Mandalorian stories that took place after this?
So that's a good question, Keats. And it begs the question, where are the Mandalorians during the sequel trilogy? And it's funny because when they were brought up in Clone Wars, that was my thinking at that time as well. It was, oh wow, the Mandalorians seem to be incredibly important to the Star Wars universe and Star Wars mythology, but they are not at all present in the original trilogy. And I felt like the Clone Wars answered that question by showing how they were at their most powerful. Then, through the manipulation of the Emperor, they were at their most vulnerable. And much like with the Night Sisters, much like with the Jedi, any threat to the Emperor during the Clone Wars, everything was about setting everything up so that it would be easy to take them all down at once. And that's exactly what he did. I was very happy with the coup and how dark and depressing everything is by the end of the Mandalore story in the Clone Wars. Made total sense for me. Answered that question. Now, Rebels has set up a story where there is a Mandalorian civil war and a new figurehead to try and lead Mandalore into a new glorious future. And these episodes and, you know, all the Mandalorian episodes throughout the show have provided us with avenues for future stories with them. And this is pretty directly saying there's even more stuff that's about to go down on Mandalore. And it's sort of like a queue up. And then what actually happens, I don't know. We don't know yet. But once again, in the sequel trilogy, Leia sends out her distress call. No Mandalorians come to answer it. So what's the deal with Mandalore during this time period? Are they easy for the First Order to try and reclaim? I have no idea. So I'm kind of in the same position I was at before, where originally I felt like I had a happy ending with the Clone Wars portrayal of Mandalore. And to be honest, I would have been happy if Mandalore was just completely taken off the table at the end of the Clone Wars and it was just reduced to this dysfunctional. I like what they did here, but for me, just in terms of like answering the meta question, I was like, where are the Mandalorians if they're so important? This just opens up that can of worms again of like, it seems like stuff's about to happen with them, but we don't see it. Same thing with even the Chiss, which we were talking about before. It's another example of like...
Right. I understand what you're saying, but I like the fact that they kind of reintroduced them in Rebels because it forces them to get creative with it, because the Mandalorians were a culture that's like thousands of generations old, presumably, and then just to kind of see their story end at the Clone Wars and never like really see the beginning or the middle probably would have been not very satisfying for me. So I kind of like the fact that they're still around as opposed to just kind of killing them off in the Clone Wars. I do want to see like kind of like their culture kind of end, because the whole like thing about their culture is just that they're constantly fighting. So I kind of would like to see them kind of kill each other off, whether it be like out of spite or for some kind of fuck you to the rest of the galaxy. Like collectively, they're just they're annihilating themselves along with something else to take a piece of it with them. I don't know. I feel like there's like a lot of cool ways to kill off Mandalore as long as we get like a story told from their perspective.
Yeah, I feel like at this point, since they're still alive, they're not going to go that route. I feel like they had their chance, but... but
you were saying they're not present in the sequel trilogy at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it could have definitely been at that point where the whole thing has sort of fallen apart. And, that would Thinking about it now, that does sound genuinely interesting. If
Yeah.
they do go that route with the Mandalorian, where like the reason the Mandalorian has sort of stepped away from Mandalore, it's not because he's like doesn't want to be part of the fight, or it's just that the fight has gone so bad. Like maybe like we pick up with this rebellion with Bo-Katan and the Saxons and all this, and it's just a complete shit show. And that would be interesting because it's not what I expect from it, but that's definitely sounds interesting. And it would make sense why the Mandalorians aren't around during the sequel trilogy, other than that J.J. Abrams doesn't give a shit about them.
Don't keep that in.
All right, season 4 has started, and it is going to continue with In the Name of the Rebellion, Part 1 and Part 2. Our good friend
SG,
performed by FW, is returning. But guess what? There's someone else.
Eminem, Mon Mothma,
not coming back. Coming for the first time.
Oh, double
Two
T.
tubes, double T. My name is Yates.
These episodes are written by Gary Whitta. My name is Keats.
They were?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean In the Name of the Rebellion, not Mandalore?
Yeah. These episodes have my favorite moment from the entire show.
I also remember really liking these episodes.
It's just a moment where two characters are butting heads.
Oh, yeah. No, that is a very good moment. That's a good political moment. I like that. I like that. Yeah.
I want a Saga Era show. And I never knew I wanted one.
May the Force be with you.
Always.